working on the Wariha Tetsu. Wariha Tetsu from yesterday. Hang this up real quick. Okay, did it. Alright, so, same bar we had yesterday. Starting later today, but anyways, we're at probably about 5/8, 9/16, somewhere around there, by 2. So we don't want to go any narrower than this, but we do want to take it down to 1/2 inch. So, while this is heating, I'm going to work on getting spacers figured out. Getting spacers figured out for this guy. I do want to make sure that Addison, Rich, what's up, buddy? I want to make sure I have my drawing dies on here. I gotta get my spacers in here too. Okay. Alright, drawing dies. I at least want this guy, and I think we're gonna go quarter. Maybe just a little fat. Let's see. Let's see where this goes. My 1/2 inch spacer. Over by about 1/8, a little much. So, pull this guy out, swap it through this. This one's about 200,000. Now that's pinching on my spacer, but what I can do, throw this little guy on here now. That's still a little fat. I want it to be tighter than that. Throw this little shim in there. It's about a 32nd of an inch. Great. Great. We got it. So we got the steel heating up. Right over here. Turn this off just for a second. Got my steel heating up. Rick Elm in the house, what's up? So I got my steel heating up, and then I'm gonna start using the drawing dies to reduce this bar down. And actually, you know what? That shim, like the dies are right at 1/2 inch. I think I am actually going to throw that 1/8 inch spacer back in there, so that after using the drawing dies, I have a little bit of room for flattening the material out, forging it flat. And so I'm going to need a little bit of margin there, so that I have room to work down to that 1/2 inch rather than being at 1/2 inch and then trying to forge it flat. So I am going to throw that spacer back in there. I'm going to do that right now, just so I don't forget. We're all set. We're all set. So the steel's in there, just heating up, doing its thing. Make sure to rotate it so it heats up nice and evenly. Again, right now it's at 2 inches wide by about 5/8 or 9/16 thick. I want to get it down that last little bit, and then to draw it out, and then forge it flat. Now, for all I know, I'm going to put it in there, and the dies aren't going to do anything. If that's the case, then I am going to swap to just slightly narrower dies, or just go under the power hammer to try to take it down just a little bit at a time, down to that 1/2 inch thickness, and then true up that 2-inch width, and then call this bar good. If at any point folks got questions, feel free to jump in and ask away. Let's see, I had a sweet spot over here yesterday where I could pivot to the press, pivot to the hammer. Let's see where it's at. Just a little bit, why not? This is just, honestly, for more than anything, my ease and ability to not have to move the camera all the time. What's everybody working on right now? Good afternoon from Hidden Horse Forest. What's up? Good afternoon. Hope everybody likes my cool shirt made by my friend Twyla. She's based out of Napa Valley. She does incredible work. Let's see. Steel's getting there. A little bit hotter. Forge is probably running at maybe only 2,000 right now. I just turned it on about 10 minutes ago. Steel's coming up, which is good. And then, so the next phase after this. Oh, we got a question. We got a comment. Rick says, "Got the same shirt at Forge too." Hell yeah, buddy. That's a good shirt. This is my nice T-shirt. It's actually a few years old now. It's pretty well worn in, stretched out. I think I got some welding burns on it in a couple of spots. This has become a everyday whatever shirt. It's no longer a nice T-shirt. Yeah, Twilight is super cool. The next phase after this is to cut this into 2-inch, or cut this down, stack it up about 3 inches tall. 3.5 inches tall, so I'm looking to get 6 or 7 pieces out of it. And then, anyways, and then weld it back together, forge it on the bias. Each round features welding, reducing to square, forge on the bias. Weld, reduce to a square, forge on the bias. The last weld, it's going to start as a square, so it's just setting the weld as a square, and then forging on the bias. What's your favorite color? Burgundy. Burgundy, like a crimson, burgundy, maroon, whatever you want to call it. That's my favorite color. Blood red. Probably more of like a maroon burgundy. Like a reddish purple. Rather than a bluish purple. Okay. Let's see. Let me give this one more flip. We're going to try forging dies, but I have a feeling potentially these forging dies aren't even going to do anything. So, if that's the case, I'm just going to go into the power hammer to try to gently reduce it down to that 1/2 inch stock that I want, or I guess just a little fat of 1/2 inch, to account for material shrinkage and cooling, as well as grinding cleanup. Not bad. Mine's cyan. Cyan's a cool color. Cyan's a pretty cool color. Alright, when that's hot, oh, I don't have my protection. I will be right back. Not quite cyan. This is more like a aquamarine or so. Aquamarine's another cool color. Need some. Press some, not a ton, but some. So now we'll go under the hammer to flatten it out once it's hot again. Okay. It's to hang out by the forge. If I scoop this here just a little bit, a little closer to this, I can still get this angle, right? Pressing, hammering. Yeah, I like that. For now, at least. See how that goes. Let's see. There you go. Okay. Right here, or in this progression, is we are, so this was the first weld, and now we're in the second weld. So the first weld was to make our gradient. I know I didn't draw out the gradient, but anyways, make the gradient, forge it down to a roughly 1/4 inch by 1.5 inches or 5/16 by 1.5 inches, cut it 11 pieces, stacked it up, weld it back together, forge it to a square, turn it, forge it on the bias. And so these are intermediate steps because we want to go from a bias to an S-bar, but this is kind of the progression along the way. So we're focusing forging just in this vertical orientation so we can get good width. We actually had to do some funky forging yesterday along just the edges to get that billet to spread, but we got it to spread, which is great. We stayed above our final dimension, which is good, so we have room to move. We don't want to work down to your final dimension unless you have maybe like a coal irons controller or something like that to help really control how deep of a bite you're taking so you don't go too thin. But anyways, we got our width eventually, and then we turned it. We got it initially, and then I got a little overzealous forging these points in, and then forge it slightly underneath. So once it was already kind of to a regular rectangular bar, I had to do that widening. But anyways, this is our process, so we can get nice wide bars, because I want these bars wide as possible, or at least 2 inches wide, so that when I go to forge it on the bias in the second round, or the next welding round, I already have some good width here. I want it to be 3 inches. So what is it? 2 inch by 2 inch square. The diagonal is 2.82 inches wide. So that's just under 3 inches, about 1/8 of an inch under 3. So I'm hoping that by starting out at too wide already and at a rectangular bar, through that 30% reduction, that's going to cause us to get a little bit more fatness, more width at the angular or at the diagonal. And then when we go to forge on the bias, we'll already have our 3 inches. It's just a matter of reducing it down to 1 inch of stock for this weld over here. So then the second weld, or the next weld after this, just realized I'm talking a lot and not watching my steel. Let's flip this. Give this the old flipper-do. Oh, not flipping very nicely. There we go. All right. So in the next weld, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna cut it, stack it. Instead of 11 pieces high, we're gonna go probably 6 or 7 pieces high. We're gonna forge it to a square. We're gonna, once it's to a square, then we are going to turn it and forge it on the bias. We're gonna forge predominantly in one orientation, vertically across the diagonal on the bias to create this S lines. And I want it to be 3 inches wide before, probably more than 3 inches, probably more like 3.5 or whatever, before I start forging in the points and creating a regular bar, which takes us from there over to here, where we're gonna cut it in half diagonally across the middle. Again, it's a 3:1 ratio. Whatever that ends up being, ideally it's 3 inches wide by 1 inch tall, but it could be less. We'll see. We'll see what we can get out of it. But anyways, 3:1 ratio. Split it in half diagonally. We're gonna flip this one. This one's gonna stay oriented this way. This one's gonna pivot basically across this plane. It's gonna rotate and flip end over end to create this activity. And then we're gonna add in a black square into one quadrant of what would be a 4-quadrant billet, except for it's gonna have 3 pieces instead of 4 pieces. So this is some of the irregular stuff that I've been doing over the last couple years to create interesting activity without going too far outside of like the norm, basically. So we're gonna get this welded, and then we're gonna, once it's solidly welded, after about the 3rd round or so of forging, I feel confident that then I can start forging on the bias, and we are going to reduce it down just the same as we did over here. We're gonna forge predominantly in one direction until we got our width, and then we're gonna start tidying up those corners, shoving those corners in to create a rectangular bar that then we can chop off and forge into whatever the hell we want. I'm hopefully gonna have enough material for 5 or 6 different styles of patterns out of just one bar. Yeah. Okay. That's good for now. I think we're probably good and hot. Evan's got a comment here. We'll get to in just a second, Evan. Apologize. I'm talking way too much. Realize I don't even have my hammer on. It's all right. We're not going too crazy on it anyways. All right. Get you turned around here. Flopping all over the place because the handle's loose. The handle's kind of wobbly, which is causing it to flop around, which is frustrating. Gosh, we're basically at that half inch, but we are also smoothed out. So I'm not really actually too mad at this. So what we're gonna get back in this heat. Let me get back in this heat. Let me zoom out. Let me get back in this heat. And then we're going to dress the edges to get dialed into that 2-inch dimension. I think we are just ever so slightly overshot by about 1/8 or 3/16. So let's get it hot again. Swapped out. Done with the drawing guys. actually, we'll start on the faces. I'm gonna start on the faces, and then we will just get that dimension dialed in, and then we'll go to the edges, and then we will go to dial in 2-inch wide dimension, and then we'll go back to the faces. What my 2-inch space is. Let's see. I'm gonna guess that these two 1-inch stop blocks that I have. Hey, look at that. 2 inches. Alright. So I got my 2 inches. I got my 1/2 inch. I just need my steel hot, and then we'll get in there and smush it. All right, Evan, your comment says, what's up? Got any tips for keeping layers nice and straight during initial presses? Mine tend to always S slightly. Is that press inconsistency or technique? Honestly, it's probably a bit of the press, but also it's just, and usually it's a little bit of play in the press. So what happens, let me dial you guys up here a little bit. So what happens is the dies come into contact, and then they shift just a little bit. And then they go back up, and they come down, make contact, press, and then shift just a little bit. And they do that every time. The bottom die stays stationary, but the top die and the apron and the mask that the piston is riding, whether it's on the top, whether it's on the bottom, there's always some sort of little play in there, even just the slightest little bit. And that little bit of play causes things to kind of get shifted over multiple times. So whenever I can, I actually try to work the billet from both directions. I have a handle just on one side on this one, but typically when I'm working big billets, I'll actually have a handle on both sides. I'm looking to see if I have any examples right now. I don't. But if I'm working big billets and I really want to avoid stuff getting kind of like a parallelogram almost, or layers to shift, if I want to avoid that, I do one heat, one orientation, and then I'll flip it around horizontally, 180, and then I'll force it the other way. So it's always going to do that offset, but by flipping the billet around the other way, then you're kind of undoing that. If you can work it as evenly as you possibly can, that would be great. I will say, hammers can do this too. Again, it's because of just little bits of play, whether it's an air hammer or a mechanical hammer. If there's some play, it's going to shift. It's going to come down, make contact, and then shift just a little bit, one way or the other. It could potentially depend on what side of the die you're favoring more, right? Like the right edge or the left edge, or right side of the face or left side of the face. And it just happens. So the best thing you can do is to kind of counteract that by flipping the billet around, not just flipping 180. 180 is not going to fix it. Or I guess 180 around, what is that? So that, I guess that would be the Z. Is that the Z axis? No. X. Right. X, Y. Maybe it is the Z. Anyways. So rotating it 180 is not going to do that. You got to flip it end around end. 180 degrees. Put it back in the forge. Work it again. And once a billet gets a little too long for the forge, it becomes a little bit trickier. You can still do it, but you got to be really paying attention to which end is which, and how often or how consistently you're flipping it around. Now there are some times when you get to a point where you just can't. Ideally, hopefully at that point, you're at a kind of a point of diminishing returns, which means that the material's been forged down so far that it kind of doesn't matter if you flip it 180 anymore. But I will say, I notice it the most when you're reducing from a tall height down to a narrow bar. And if you're constantly working just from one orientation, or one with the handle on just one side or one end, you are going to find that that is going to be a problem for you. So there was a time, let's see, I first figured this out when I worked out in Connecticut. I'm talking a lot and the steel's getting hot again. There's a damn mosquito in here. I hate mosquitoes. Anyways, there was a time where I had a pair of tongs that my friend Peter Swarsberg made that allowed me to hold square stock, flat stock, different thicknesses, slightly different widths. And so I wasn't using handles at all. No handles. I was just grabbing the bar. It was awesome. I need to make another pair of those tongs because they were super handy dandy. I would love to have another pair of those. But until I get some of those, but that's when I started doing the flipping the billet 180 because I was noticing that exact same problem. So I started spinning the billet 180, and that was really helping, especially during the majority of the reduction. But like I said, once you get down to a certain point, there's like a point of diminishing returns where it's just, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyways, it's not doing it as much. It's less likely to do it. But if you just go from full height all the way down and you're forging from the same orientation the whole time, you're gonna get that slight shift off. And that sucks. All right, I gotta hit this steel, and then we'll get back and talk about it some more. I guess I'm not hitting it, but I'm squishing it. Squishing it. All right, here we go. Having a hand or a piece that acts as the handle is that, let's see, the stack was originally 3 inches tall, right? Obviously this isn't 3 inches, but anyways, the stack was 3 inches tall. It is now half an inch tall. That means the billet has gone through 600% reduction. So that 5/16 of an inch thick piece, oh wait, it was 11 pieces.